we go. David Klein is here. Promote panelist. So that's David promoted.
And Stan.
We'll look for Stan.
Kachnowski.
Yeah, there
David,
he is.
good to see you. Thank you.
There.
And David, oh, beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, someone has a wonderful chime in their back.
Me, sorry. There.
And obviously, we know that it's 12 noon.
Yeah. And that you're in a church. Yeah.
He's a holy person. David, first of all, congratulations to you. This is a big moment.
Thank you.
For you. And we're going to, with your blessings, get into this a little bit, because I think that your news of this morning, which you couldn't share yesterday, speaks tremendously to what we'll be talking about today. Stan, welcome.
You are.
Hey, good to see you, Gil.
Stan, it is thrilling to have you. And I know that we're beginning in just a moment. We're going to let people sort of enter in. I see that the numbers, this is a little bit like one of those global fundraisers. The numbers keep on sort of ratcheting up and up, which is gratifying. And I was just saying, Stan, that before we officially begin, I was extending congratulations to David and the Click Therapeutics community on their announcement this morning. Anybody who sees and anybody who's listening right now, I highly recommend you go and just type in Click Therapeutics and hit news, and I think you'll see a dramatic announcement that I believe Sarah touches on some of the data that you and the Galen Growth Analytics team have been mining for the last, well, I'd say 3 quarters. And looking at the last year and past years and taking a look at the trends of the digital health sector and what this means for 2024. So I think that we'll have a lot to talk about here. We'll wait one more moment and then we're going to really dive into this conversation. And I just want to begin, before I introduce you, with an expression of thanks. This is, hey, David, if you just move your laptop screen a little toward you, so that we have the pleasure of seeing more of you.
Is that good, Stan? I mean, Gil?
Yep. Stan, do you agree? Since you're
Stan's the expert. Stan's the model here.
Yeah,
I would tilt it a little more. I would tilt it a little more, or bring your seat up a little more, David. Oh my goodness. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to jump into this very quickly. We've got a lot going on today. We've got a lot to discuss. I want to thank all our participants for logging on and having great interest in this. You know, we often bandy about numbers when we're looking at the success or the weakness or potential vulnerability of digital health. I've always believed that numbers alone don't tell the story. And actually, in the recent Galen Growth Report, and Sarah, I'll be turning to you in just a few moments for some quick highlights. In the recent Galen Growth Report, which is available, as I believe, as a gift to all those that registered and are part of this conversation today, a tremendous value. You'll get a chance to see the history of the quarters of investment and partnerships in the digital health category. It's illuminating, because while it looks a little bit like rolling valleys, if you sort of chart all those quarter-to-quarter points, the story behind that rolling valley is really what's most intriguing and what we're going to be exploring today. I think it's very critical. This is a evolving category. I think it's a fast evolving category right now. I would say we learned a tremendous amount during the COVID-19 spike, and we're applying that. I think we're moving into a time where we have a much more mature, thoughtful, experienced investment audience. And I think that they're taking the learnings of the last 3 years and beginning to apply them starting now and going forward. Let me introduce our 4 incredible panelists. First of all, David, again, pleasure to have you, particularly today. I know it's a hectic day for you and your Click Therapeutics community. David is a Renaissance person par excellence. You know him as the founder and CEO of Click Therapeutics, but David has a history and involvement in many other things. I believe that David is an expert in the areas of the arts. He's been a consultant and advisor to Pfizer. He is a serial entrepreneur. He, as I mentioned, is the founder and co-CEO of Click Therapeutics. Click this morning, not to keep people in suspense, announced a impressive collaborative agreement with I believe, an EU headquartered global biopharmaceutical company on developing and commercializing prescription digital therapeutics to treat substance use disorders, beginning with probably one of this nation's top public health urgencies, which is the opioid use and misuse of these therapeutics. This conversation, what you've announced this morning, will undoubtedly play in today's conversation. Next, it's my privilege to introduce everyone to Julian DeSalisbury. Julian is the founder and CEO of Galen Growth. The Galen Growth, in my opinion, having used the data again and again, and as Stan knows, I presented using the data at the HITLAB annual summer conference, is the premier data analytics company that has brought new rigor to the digital health sector. Julian, you've become in my opinion, the ultimate deal side analyst with comprehensive and objective data that looks at many different points. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, more than 600 million different data points to take a look at what's happening in the category. Sarah and I will make every effort to pronounce your family name.
And do it.
For those who see the screen, of course, you understand that this is a superhuman challenge on my part. Schachmachtenberg is that. Please say it, Bo, so everybody can say it correctly. That's your first challenge for today.
Thanks, Gil. It's Schmachtenberg.
Schmachtenberg. Thank you very much. Now, Sarah I'll refer to you as Sarah at this point. Sarah is the head of data and analytics for Europe and the United States for Galen Growth. If Galen Growth were an accounting firm and Sarah were its chief accountant, she would be signing off on the audit. And so Sarah is the lead analyst who signs off on the data. She takes it very, very seriously, as you'll learn during this conversation. And these reports are used by private equity, venture capital groups, private investors, biopharma, business development leaders to guide critical multi-million-dollar decisions. Last, Stan Kachnowski. He's a PhD and MPA he's the director of the digital health at the world-renowned Columbia Business School, the executive education program. He is the chair and founder of HITLAB. I would say if digital health had its own United Nations, HITLAB would be its General Assembly and Stan would be its Secretary General. Stan is, you like that, Stan, don't you? I can tell, like, hey, I'll use that. Okay, you're welcome to. Stan really has his finger on the pulse of the relationships. The HITLAB conferences, and please take a look at those, really attract a broad array of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are in business development from the pharmaceutical industry side. David Klein has been a keynote at the HITLAB conference in June and got pretty much a standing ovation. If they understood then what you were going to announce this morning, I'm sure it would have been a longer one. Welcome to the four of you. Very, very appreciated. I just want to kick off, Sarah. Could you please provide our listeners today with 3 quick highlights from the Year in Review North America analysis? And then I'm going to turn to David to kick off our conversation.
Sure, lovely. And thanks very much, Gil. And you kind of hit the nail on the head in the introduction. We talked about businesses or digital health having focus on being a business, right? We've experienced over the last year the nosedive, and finally this spring a handful of bankruptcies, right, of powerful digital health companies, Paratherapeutics, Femtech Health, now Babylon. What's going on with Babylon? What we're seeing is that transition to really focus on solid business cases, right? And in order to do that, what you'll see in the report is there are two critical topics, and those are proof points and partnerships. Partnerships announcements are up 1.2% since H1 2022, so that's great. And those partnerships really this year, they're focused 20% on health systems, right? Mayo Clinic tops the list. So you see who's starting to move into this space. It's those health systems getting serious. Health management systems was the second highest funded cluster. So that's where you see the critical need of digital health ventures to focus on partnerships for scaling, for funding, for getting access to patients, right? We're looking forward to hearing more from Stan, I think, about proof points during this hour, but the clinical evidence that ventures need is growing in digital health. However, what we saw last year were actually regulatory filings going down. So I think it's probably a catch up on the pandemic, right? Getting the studies back up and moving, but it's going to be a huge focus going forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that summary. And David, I'm going to turn to you. You know, you've played many different roles during this time. Obviously, as founder and CEO of Click Therapeutics, you've been very, very visible. But you've also provided great analysis about what's happening in the category. I just want to reflect on that, and then we're going to have a chance also to dive into today's announcement. But you've been an active author on opinion pieces in leading publications about how this sector needs to make the shift. Reflecting on what Sarah just said, I'm wondering if you could just share with us some of the thoughts that you've been very public about the shift or the demand or I'll say the bar that digital health companies now have to cross to be more like therapeutic companies as opposed to engineered tech companies. You really have called for consistently a standard, a biotech-like standard in clinical data. And I'm wondering if you could share with us your perspective on that.
No, sure. That's a great question. And look, let me start by thanking everyone for having me here and Galen Growth and so on. Hopefully someone's recording this, Gil, because my wife will never believe that someone called me a Renaissance man. So thank you for that. And look, I think, yeah, I would really echo what Sarah said. I think that's right on. There's a kind of consolidation of stronger business models. And I think that, you know, these different issues in the industry have different, frankly, root causes. I mean, they all do come down to, you know, ultimately what are business decisions, I believe. But as Gil noted, look, I think some of them, when you look at some of these companies, and I think you alluded to the Pear Therapeutics bankruptcy, for example, I think companies and digital health companies in particular are kind of struggling, at least some of them are, to find the right business case. So in the instance of Pear Therapeutics, for example, this is a company that, you know, really tried to go with their OUD product to the most sophisticated audience out there, right? To the providers, to the payers. I mean, really trying to get the program prescribed, yet, you know, simply did not run the randomized controlled trials on the app that would be required for any medicine to be adopted in that fashion, right? So as Gil noted, I have been calling for, you know, more rigorous evidence standards, but I'd probably say more appropriate, right? If it would depend what audience you're going to. In our instance, we are discovering and developing apps, which are essentially classified as medical devices, seeking treatment claims from different regulatory bodies, running very robust, I'd say, drug-like randomized controlled trials. And that's because our intended audience really are the prescribers and the insurance companies and the patients. And we, you know, want to make treatment claims about the programs that we're developing because we genuinely do believe that they're medicine. So I think that there's different routes to take, but if you're going to take that route, really you can't be, you know, running studies without, you know, real control groups or wait list type trials. I mean, you know, I don't think anyone will lower the bar of medicine for digital. So if something's going to be medicine, I think that that bar is going to remain high, and that, anyone going down, following that trajectory really does need to generate robust kind of medicine quality data.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that. We're going to circle back to you very soon to get your perspective on today's announcements. Too rich of an opportunity not to, since we have the CEO with us. It's breaking news. And Julian, I've read the report countless times, and one of the things I find is that people kind of jump to the numbers intuitively. It's like, in proposals, they jump to the last page. How much will it cost? And yet I find with Galen Growth, the reports, that there's behavioral data in there. You're a business leader. I mean, you founded Galen Growth for a very particular reason. You felt that the industry needed a higher standard of metrics. But I'd like to ask you, based on what David was just talking about, can you give us some indication of the business operational shift that this current report directs us toward? It's different. Put the numbers aside, whether it's more money or less money. I think based on Sarah's summary, David's sort of like saying, hey, this is where we planted the flag around real clinical work. What do you see else? What do you see in that report?
Thanks, Gil. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this evening. David's words are music to our ears at Galen Growth. It's interesting because the report that we are referring to today kind of works nicely hand in hand with the report we published a couple of weeks ago. That is our second edition of Clinical Evidence Digital Health, where we actually drill into the digital health ecosystems across the world to look at the standard of clinical evidence. And we have our own little methodology that tries to define what the threshold is that would define a venture as proven in its clinical evidence versus, I guess, work in progress. So I would encourage people to look at that as well. And there will be a focal point for us at HLTH in Las Vegas in early October for those of you who will be there. To your question, Ogil, and thanks for it. We recognized a shift as far back as summer last year, where we saw what the volatility was doing to the ecosystem and was shifting the dialogue away from the great story that was raising a lot of funding in a cottage industry. And by that I mean a multitude of innovators, all innovating sometimes with a little incremental differentiation between the venture next door. But we then took that the step further in terms of, okay, so if we are going to see an inflection point in digital health, and we are going to see a maturing of the ecosystem, what is that going to result in? And what are people going to be looking for? So one of those was to, of course, look at proof points. And, nothing more important now than proof points, and clinical evidence is one of those. And so it's really pleasing to be amongst David and Stan, who have been advocating this position for some time, and to reflect on the fact that not only are we seeing the whole ecosystem maturing, becoming fitter, and therefore closer to purpose as far as the patient is concerned, and therefore healthcare outcomes are concerned, but at the same time really drilling into, the way to understand or check that what is inside the tin is exactly what it says on the outside of the tin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for Julian. I'm going to swing over to Sarah and Stan for a second. Sarah, one of the things we've just talked about is clinical evidence. I hear a lot of buzz about, sort of the COVID-19 period, where FDA felt like it needed to rush into action. It had the emergency, the Emergency Act. It approved a lot of things that it felt it just needed to get out there because there wasn't that one-to-one patient-physician connection. Do you think that the report that you've just signed off on and what you talk about are fewer FDA sort of approvals, is it a combination of we've just had a lot of stuff approved by the agency, plus we no longer feel the societal urgency, plus, to David and Julian's point, the bar is totally shifted, and a lot of companies are saying, I'm not ready to jump that bar. So I'm not going to submit because I think to your point, and David's point, Pear and Babylon are indicators that sort of like getting a LLC or a C Corp going and saying, hey, I'm a business, send money my way. The rules have totally changed. So is it the COVID-19 period it hasn't, but it's perceptually come to a close. And David's point of the game has changed. Is that really the indicator of why we're seeing fewer regulatory reviews?
Your analysis is very complete. I like that a lot. And what we see
Can I get a job? Can I get a job with you?
You have to work really hard. Absolutely, if you want to, Gil, you can come right on over.
Thank God.
What we're talking about, when I say fewer regulatory approvals, that's just in digital health, right? That's what we focus on, digital health.
Understood.
Overall, I can't tell you what the numbers are. But in addition to those approvals, right, we've seen the number of peer-reviewed publications drop dramatically. And that was then the hypothesis building. We weren't able to run the trials as easily, getting the participation, recruiting patients. Now, of course, you have all the remote, right, clinical trials tools and stuff like that you have in digital health. But until those got set up, I really think you did see fewer clinical trials being run throughout the pandemic, unless they were, of course, focused on those vaccines that everyone was focused on. But the rest of the picture, right, it seemed that the numbers did go down. We don't have publications, right, that give the evidence that people have run those rigorous trials and have come to conclusions based on that. So it's really based on the publications we see, and then also not the regulatory approvals, right? But there's absolutely no reason to think that that's a permanent level, right? It is just a blip we expect to see on our screen, and then that will continue because, as you said, the focus is really ventures are getting out there, generating evidence, right? The ones that the digital therapeutics is a growing category, of course. They are requiring the evidence, especially for example, Germany has the rigorous DIGA program. They have to build it for that. And anything, if you want to go to the FDA and say this is a medical product, then you have to have that evidence.
And better evidence, I have a sense. So, Stan, you really have this big picture approach. HITLAB gives you a forum to sit down with the entrepreneur, who has sort of seed money in their pocket. They're there around the table. And then I see, mammoth companies like Eli Lilly, Merck, GSK, they're also at your table. So you're really spanning the globe when it comes to the category. I wanted to get your perspective, especially now that we've heard from Sarah and David and Julian. I would value your insider perspective. I think this audience would be thrilled. Without disclosing any confidences, could you share with us what you hear from the bigger players that really are driving the partnership level? I won't even mention names because I don't want people to assume that it's them. But again, these big biopharma companies, they're asking for your advice as a counselor, as a researcher, as a leader of the category. What are they telling you that they're looking at, and not just in terms of therapeutic areas, but in terms of the standards that they expect to see in order to make let's have these people in and have a conversation with them. What are the criteria?
That's great question, Gil, and really appreciate your invitation to join you here today, and thank you, Galen Growth, as well, for having me, and certainly love long names, having been a visiting professor in India for 20 years now. A lot of my students have last names with 7 to 10 syllables. So big fan of long last names. And again, I think for the community here that's listening, I just popped in my LinkedIn to chat, the webinar chat here. If anyone wants to contact me about any questions or any concerns about evidence and evidence generation, again, that's really what we've focused on at the lab over the last 25 years, and is evidence generation. And that's really what you're driving toward, Gil, is, whether it's a study we've done with things like this, these RFID packages that can talk to people's cell phones and let companies know if their clinical trials are actually being used, or whether it's doing another study like an Apple Watch. We've done over 800 studies over the last 25 years looking at the evidence, first of .com stuff and some of the original kind of health media, body media stuff, if you remember that, Gil, and you know, the folks that went over to Google after
Oh,
that.
I'm gonna check that out, Stan, on my Apple Newton.
There you go, exactly. So that's the kind of stuff that we study, and those are the reasons why family foundations, multilateral agencies, folks at the UN, WHO, not the General Secretary, unfortunately, but I do like the promotion you gave me earlier, Gil. Thank you for that. I will talk to my boss about that next time.
You are certainly the peacemaker of the sectors. So Stan, when you're sitting with those big companies,
they want evidence. They want evidence.
Okay.
And so what they're looking for is evidence. And if they see that the technology has developed a pathway, a process, you know, and it's interesting because they're looking for things very similar to what Gates Foundation and WHO want as well. Sustainability. Can it sustain itself? Is it a financial model that has some viability in the ecosystem it's in, whether it's in Ghana or India or the UK or the US? Does it have some kind of sustainability model? Can it scale? They want evidence of that. And it doesn't have to be an FDA study. So for those of you who are watching and listening to this, think about it as it has to just be evidence. If you're going to make a claim like it cures cancer, then you certainly are going to need an FDA approval. But if you're going to do other things and have other claims that are stepping down from that, then there are ways to do that. And I think, you know, again, going back to David and all the great work he's done at Click Therapeutics, think about the stuff that they've done. They've been a leader in this area now for several years. But they were very early on a very hot commodity because David came in with senior executive experience. He came in with a really strong team that could build platforms. And they were able to negotiate really good terms on some early BD&L teams with almost no evidence. They just said, look, here's what we're going to do. We know we can do it. And a lot of times, if you're working for a partnership, Gil, going back to your question, you can get from life sciences and biotech upfront money in the 7 figures for a lockup for 2 to 4 years post operating model in a therapeutic area or in a geography. And they're willing to do that, but you have to bring some kind of evidence. It could be evidence of execution in your history, like David brought, could be evidence in some data, could be by the way, the person who's developing our product also developed the Apple Watch, you know, if you've got like Eve, you know, on your team. So that's the kind of stuff you can bring to the table. And that's the kind of the deals you can make for non-dilutive capital and regular capital.
Thank you, Stan. No, I just shared with everyone, to your point, the Click Therapeutics press release that went out this morning, just to create a reference point, because we planned this webinar weeks ago. No, obviously our participants didn't plan their news around our events. No, that's a decision, just to sort of be transparent with people. That's a decision between 2 business partners. It's fortuitous. And David, I want to swing back on this morning's news. We've just had sort of a round robin about the changing landscape. You've been writing about that for quite some time, particularly after the Paratherapeutics announcement and the ultimate tragedy of their declaring bankruptcy. But what can you share with us about this morning's announcement that kind of reinforces the work that Sarah and her team have been doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking me about that, Gil. So there was a press release this morning. I can't say too much else about it, although obviously it announces a partnership a collaboration between Click Therapeutics and Indivior, which will start with a program for opioid use disorder called CT-102. And you know, I can say that Indivior itself has a rich history in that space. Obviously, I would regard them, and I think they are regarded as the marquee company in substance use disorder medications for sure. They discovered and developed buprenorphine, and are now commercializing a number of drugs in that space that, you know, I certainly believe are helping people and in fact saving lives. And it's an honor to begin this journey with them. And you know, it's not you know, really every day you get to embark on something where you're pretty confident that the work that we're doing here at Click and that the work that we'll do with Indivior, we certainly believe will contribute to the bettering of people's lives. And in fact, I at least personally believe will help to save some people's lives with opioid use disorder. So, thrilled and honored to announce the collaboration today. And it's something that I think we can really drive meaningful change in a very terrible area, frankly, terrible disease area that millions of people just in the United States alone are affected by. So,
David, taking a card from what you had said earlier and what we've been hearing about clinical evidence, I'm and again, please, no, you won't divulge any proprietary information. We understand that, but obviously a relationship of this importance from a public health standpoint alone requires a great deal of forethought and planning, and to Stan's point, clinical exploration. And could you share not any specifics, I understand, but your perspective about how you and your team will go about demonstrating the value of this partnership to the patient?
Sure, and I can't get into specifics about this. As announced in the PR this morning, we're beginning with an exploratory phase, and we may release more information on more specifics around that next year. I can say, generally speaking, Click as a company, does look to incorporate, utilize both behavioral treatments and cognitive treatments, where we're really looking to discover, develop, and patent neuromodulatory methods of treating patients, and not only just behavioral treatments. And we often will marry those type of techniques and incorporate them into our platform to treat a certain disease. And we're really, focused in general as a company on early evidence generation that, serves to justify advancing programs into pivotal studies and beyond through to commercialization. So, we have a very rigorous, as a company generally, approach towards development in a very biotech-like way, where we believe we can drive similar outcomes in certain areas as medications can, or that the app itself, when combined with medications, can result in a safer and more efficacious treatment. And we look to prove that in a way that's convincing to payers and providers. And the general advantage is that instead of taking 10 or 15 years and $1 billion, let's say, which is what it does to takes to create a new drug, we could potentially do things like that in just a few years and for a very small fraction of the cost. So
thank you, David. Thank you for sharing that with us. And again, congratulations on this. I would say almost historic news for the category. And that's really why I want to go over to Julian now, and then ask Sarah for her point of view, and Stan afterward for sort of a more global perspective. Julian, the reports tell us what is happening. It gives us an indication of partnerships. It gives us an indication of what's the benchmark that investors are looking at. It gives us an indication of what's the regulatory process, and obviously the dollars. But when I read the report, I see what's happening, and I also see like the don'ts, like the don't do this. And I'm wondering if, because you're the analyst in a way, you're the CEO of Galen Growth, but you're sort of the analyst of all of these data, all of these reports. You often opine on multiple reports at the same time. Not to put you on the hot spot, but I think our listeners, I'll put you on the hot spot though. That's my nice way of saying I'm going to put you on the hot spot, though I don't want to put you on the hot spot. Stan's going to use that technique. But I wanted to get your perspective on the don't do this, because what I'm hearing from David is focus on the science, focus on real clinical evidence. Treat yourself like a biotech company. Don't treat yourself like the new gimmick, gadget, toy. And I'm wondering if people sort of thought like, all I need to do is build it and they will come. Field of Dreams. I think these reports show us Field of Dreams is no more. It is now the hard work that people like David are willing to do, which is, you've got to build a company that's a health-oriented company around the science, around clinical relationships. Looking at the reports, would you share for this audience the don't do this, the don't do that from your perspective? Sarah's like groaning, like, oh no, he's put Julian. Thank God, not me. It's Julian.
No, I think it's an excellent question, Gil, and there's going to be quite a few. But in the essence of time, I guess let's try and drill in a couple. I've always been a little saddened and distraught over the last 8 years of Galen growth and working closely with many of the innovators in Asia Pac, where we invented Galen growth, and of course since then in Europe and the US. And it's changing, which is the good news, but by the consistent be-all and end-all objective of a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs have worked out, which is to raise VC funding and to do something with VCs, etc. And my most consistent bit of feedback to any entrepreneur reaching out saying, what do I need to do to raise funding, was show us the data. Show us that, or show the investor that you are able to deliver on the promise or the claims that you are making, rather than telling everyone that there's much promise somewhere down at the bottom of the other end of the tunnel. So I guess the don't is stop focusing solely on VC. Yes, you need funding, don't get me wrong, but you can also build a business that doesn't solely rely on being continuously on a VC drip feed. And really focus on building a tight team that is completely wanting to build a business that is able to deliver at a patient level or even at a partner level, the promise. So I guess that would be one don't, which we're starting to see a shift in, simply because people are forced or are being forced to shift that way. The other way is build a business that is can stand up by itself as much as you can. Obviously, in the early days, that's hard, but try and build a business from the get-go that can stand up by itself, and therefore, is not going to fall over the minute there is any volatility in the funding landscape.
That's great. Now, Sarah, do you think that Julian you're probably saying, thank goodness that wasn't me, but did Julian touch on the points? Do you agree with him? You're on mute, by the way, the famous you're on mute.
Thanks. Of course, he's my boss. I have to agree. It's absolutely critical for investors. We've seen that the companies getting the funding are the ones that have clinical evidence, right? The data is in the report about that. But it's absolutely also has to stay realistic, starting small. I think Stan referred to that, or David referred to that. You don't have to go out for the FDA approval immediately, right? Our clinical evidence report shows companies are on average at least 7 years old before they have significant clinical strength, right? And that means either they have one clinical trial, they have one regulatory approval, or they have 4 peer-reviewed publications, right? So you have to stay realistic. This doesn't happen overnight, but with the maturing of digital health that we've seen over the past few years, right? Companies are mature enough; they have to now be focused on this evidence that we're talking about, and that's where we stand right now, right? The more mature ventures, if they're in the areas that require it, have to show the evidence.
That's great insights combined. Stan, I think you hold one of the great conferences of our industry. It's obviously it's directed specifically toward the digital health sector, and then obviously there's many sectors within that sector. Everything from technology and wearables to information to, of course, therapeutics. And you see companies. Some of the companies I've seen at the HITLAB programs are startups, new entrepreneurs. They are bootstrapped. Some of the companies around that table are quite substantial. And as I mentioned earlier, you've got the big, biopharmaceutical companies in the audience sitting and listening and learning. For the entrepreneurs in the audience today, and we'll be listening to this, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit from your perspective, based on what you've heard so far from David and Julian and Sarah, and say to yourself, gee, listening very intensely to this conversation, when I sit down with people and they ask me, Stan, what do you think? on the basis of this conversation, here are 3 or 4 points that are definitely going to be top of mind.
Yeah, I think first of all, what Galen Growth is doing with the partnership report is so important, because one of the things that really helps companies get through this digital health winter right now are strong partnerships. We're seeing that with Click Therapeutics and all the strong work David's done. He understood from the very beginning, how do we make sure we're going to build a sustainable and scalable company? Strong partnerships. And what Sarah's report, what Galen and Julian are doing are just phenomenal in terms of putting this all together and showing us where it's happening and who's leading the fray there. And that's important, because in this age right now, we really need to see that build. So that's number one, is partnerships are driving innovation, and they're not only innovation, but they're driving sustainability. Number two is evidence. And I think that's one of the things that we've clearly heard here from all quarters, whether it's been from Julian and Sarah, David and myself, is that evidence generation, whether it's early, like, hey, I got a Nobel Prize winner, fund my company. That's not evidence like everyone thinks of today. But if you have a Nobel Prize winner backing your molecule, your digital health device, or your therapeutic app or whatever, you've got a little bit of credibility. Or if you say, oh, by the way, my co-founder is Judy Faulkner. Oh, yeah, and she founded Epic. You're going to have a little bit of credibility there. Or Glenn Tolman, who's got 4 on his 4th unicorn. So that helps a lot in terms of raising funding and building partnerships and just generally building credibility. So that evidence generation, whether it's small, medium, or large, i.e. 3,000 person FDA study, is going to help you a lot. And then and that's why I like David's term, early evidence generation. I think we need to think more about that, because evidence generation doesn't have to be a $2 million 3-year study for a digital health app. And evidence generation, this is what we do at HITLAB. Evidence generation can be a 30-day IRB approved study using an independent IRB, not an academic IRB, can actually be done with an N equals 10 or 20. And we've helped people win $1.5 million NATO innovation prizes with a 30. We actually did it in 28 days with an N equals 14 study, showing that a digital therapeutic, this is Sana, the goggle app, goggle actually helps people get to REM sleep faster. And NATO gave him a $1.5 million prize because of that study. So these kinds of rapid evidence generation studies are really important. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is that this is a digital health winter, but just remember what happens on a roller coaster. When you're at the top, it goes down to the bottom and goes back up to the top again. And so this reminds me a lot of what we saw during the post.com age, where people were rebuilding and retrenching and really bringing things together for later on in the 2000s, or the early 1990s. We're coming out of a recession, kind of 91, 92-ish, and we had a Clinton presidency that made healthcare really important, really big. And that wound up a lot of companies that most people won't know about, like Open Systems, GMIS, Envoy. Those companies were all bought by WebMD and by McKesson, HBOC, which was bought by McKesson, for hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. So that digital health, that winter, and that wasn't called digital health at that point, but that health IT winter or biomedical informatics winter in the early 90s became a boom in the late 90s. And that was all mostly analytics and back-end transaction systems, where now it's more information and decision-making and patient centricity systems. That was being built, and that's what we're seeing now. So a lot of these investments, a lot of these partnerships are going to pay in spades over the next 5 years, as we see fax machines, phone calls, and paper slowly wind itself out of the American healthcare system.
That's great. Stan, I think on the Q&A, Greg Jackson had a slew of questions. And in your session, you just really answered about 5 of those questions. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And if any of our panelists want to take a look at the Q&A and sort of factor in some of those questions in their responses, that would be very, very appreciated. Now, I'm going to come back to you, David, now, because something that we don't talk about, I will say from my own private equity experience, working with GT Sargolder Radner out of Chicago, today it's a $10 billion fund. One of the things I learned is investors invest in teams. They want hard evidence, but they want to know who am I investing in? I'm trusting you with my money. I'm trusting your insights and your persistence and your tenacity with my money. And David, in my study of Click Therapeutics, you've built a very strong team at the top. I think that it's a combination of Jim Collins's Good to Great meets John Katzenbach's The Wisdom of Teams, sort of smooshed into one book. Could you share with us a little bit about the importance of building that team on the top? And what was your perspective in terms of bringing in the people that you brought in, and how that's resulted in the company's well-being and success?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think, especially in our industry, again, we do follow this kind of biotech-like pathway, but ultimately, a key difference is, at least in my view, and this is a bit subjective, so forgive me if it sounds that way, but in digital therapeutics, I believe, at least, and this is where you really start to delineate from a biotech company, where in a biotech product, that kind of, call it compound, is the compound, right? It's the composition of matter. It's going to be, as effective as it is for the next, who knows, 10, 20 years. In digital therapeutics, really the strength of the team and the people from from the top all the way through the entire organization really have a direct effect, I'd say, on the potential safety and efficacy of those programs and the engagement. So it's really critical to get those right people in those right seats. I think, Click has a mix of, ex kind of biotech and pharma people with ex tech people, where, and then ex medical device people. It's a unique model, right? We have a kind of biotech business model, but our products are apps, and but we're technically a medical device company, all, being done under ISO 13485 and so on. So I think we've worked hard to bring people on board who kind of share that, common mission and sense of purpose, and who are really interested in playing a key role in the transformation of medicine. And that's one thing that, I think everyone here shares, is that vision, that what we're doing here is really on the cusp of transforming medicine in a way where new categories like cell therapies and gene therapies did to some extent, but not in the masses. Meaning, I think, we're near a time in the next, 1 to 5 years where people you or I may know will go into the physician's office, our friends or family, they might have insomnia or high blood pressure. And, that physician will say, well, hey, instead of prescribing a, Schedule 4 drug, why don't you try this 6-week or 8-week FDA cleared program? It's been helping a lot of my other patients. And why don't you try this first? Or, I'm going to prescribe this drug, but this app along with it, that's also been helping a lot of my patients ultimately maybe get off the drug, or not have to go on higher doses, or, and so on and so forth. So I think, that we've been able to attract real top talent out of these, top tech, top medical device, top pharma companies, through really that mission. I mean, really everyone here does really share that kind of common sense of purpose and drive to see safer and more effective treatments in the hands of patients, and ultimately, helping providers and insurers provide better treatments at lower costs. So it's a great question, and thanks for asking it.
Thank you, David, for that really detailed answer. I don't think it's a question we asked enough of enterprises. And Julian, I'm going to turn that question over to you in a funny way. Now, Galen really looks at about 14,000 different ventures. As I said earlier, 600 plus million data points. It's a huge amount of analysis that goes on. Sarah probably drinks more coffee even than I do in order for her and the team to get that done. But what I have found really illuminating about the Galen Growth Reports as a user is the detail, as I said, beyond the numbers, but really is reflected in terms of the category. I'm wondering, sort of like in just this conversation we've had with David, taking a look at executive teams, taking a look at quality of teams, who's recruiting who in the category? What's the experiences of the C-suite? Do they know the therapeutic categories? Do they know about the regulatory environment? Just your opinion. I often meet a lot of digital health ventures where the founders are not from the category. Often they're engineers, and not really from the sector. They're not from the health insurance sector. They're not from the therapeutic sector. They're people who have an idea and they're designing it. They're designers or engineers. Do you think Galen Growth may ever look at the attributes of some of the companies that you track, the 14,000, to take a look at those that are doing the most or succeeding the most? What's the construct of the executive team?
It's a fabulous question, Gil, and you're not the first, I'd say, from the VC industry, asking us whether some of the indices and scoring we do of ventures can help some sort of prediction model to, I guess, ascertain the next successful digital venture. If we had that crystal ball, I guess, I'm not sure we'd sell it. We'd probably use it to our own advantage. Listen, we already have started looking at leadership teams for for digital ventures. If you look at our indices or signals that we have built for digital ventures, which exist in our Health Tech Alpha platform, which is the data platform that we've built, we look at leadership teams and we start scoring leadership teams. We look at their background, we look at their achievements, we look at a number of factors. Your question's excellent. It's certainly where we would like to see the index, looking at the quality of leadership teams go. In other words, start really digging into the relevance of their experience and how that can continue to help understand or look into, I guess, whether that experience is aligned to what the venture itself is trying to achieve and what it needs to achieve, for example, partnerships, to be able to succeed. And therefore, is that team, that leadership team, got the right skills and experience to actually achieve that? So that's where we want to go, and that's where we're slowly going. And you're right, 600 million data points means that we're gradually getting closer and closer to that. A CEO with a great background and a great set of skills, but not necessarily directly relevant to the space that he or she has entered, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It means somebody's got the passion, the desire, has figured out a pain point that they're trying to fix. But the important thing is, of course, that individual also has the ability to recognize the fact that they need to surround themselves with the people with the right skills and experience to ensure that they travel the journey safely and successfully.
Julian, thank you. We sadly only have 8 minutes left, and I'd like to go around and ask each of you a question, sort of like what's next on the horizon from your perspective. So Sarah, you've just issued both a global report and a North American report. Julian mentioned earlier that you're going to be, or the team will be, at Health Without Vowels in Las Vegas. That's taking place in October, early October. I think the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th of the month. You'll be there. Will you be sharing any new data at Health?
For Health, we have absolutely we'll be publishing the full clinical evidence report with Finn. So we're looking forward to you guys make it look pretty. And then what we'll really be promoting is what's next on the horizon, which is the generative AI and how that's affecting digital health. Because we see one way is going the digital therapeutics and proof points, and the other, there's a big hype or big excitement coming in the possibility of generative AI.
Yeah, I hope as a moderator I get to see the data a little earlier than the rest of the audience. That's sort of a gentle hint, but I hope so. I'm going to swing back to David and Julian and give Stan the last word. I hope, Stan, you don't mind. It gives you a chance to think through. David, again, fantastic news this morning. I put the release in the chat. I think the release is a validator of the Galen Growth Report, very much so. David, without obviously sharing secrets that you can't share with others, Click has really become a market leader in taking a look at how the sector redefines itself. Clinical evidence, biotech-like, hiring in people who know therapeutic categories. Everything from your chief medical officer to your chief commercial officer, people schooled in the category. You're establishing world-class partnerships with biopharmaceutical companies. Could you share with us a little bit of what you think is like on the horizon? Again, don't break any proprietary news, but things that our audience and listeners to this webinar should be looking to click to deliver.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that we're, as a company, very close to having our first FDA cleared programs enter the market. So, absolutely thrilled about that. And again, I think what we're talking about is really entering the market in a way where we'll have, similar types of evidence as drugs do. And, so there's a common misconception, clearly not amongst the folks on this panel. So I should make that clear, that good digital therapeutics have been to market and not succeeded, but the reality of it is that the first kind of class, if you will, almost kind of 1.0 really did kind of find quick ways to market with at best lackluster evidence packages that were substantially less quality than you see of drugs or really anything else that a provider is prescribing. And it's not just Click that really is in this kind of new class of delivering kind of drug-like evidence packages, but there's a number of companies out there that are doing the same thing. So I think on the horizon, as I noted earlier, I believe that everyone in this room will, coming in the coming, few years, will know at minimum know people that go into a physician's office, and that physician will offer and prescribe a app as a medical treatment, whether that's for depression or fibromyalgia or lazy eye or insomnia, whatever that might be for, or a migraine, which Click has an ongoing pivotal study in right now. And that's, I believe, huge news. It's something that can really bridge the gaps in access in this country and in the world, where so many people really just don't have access to certain types of medical care. And it's, I believe, will be tremendously impactful and help change the face of medicine for the better.
David, thank you for that. I'm also reflecting, just listening to your comments, many people around the world in emerging nations actually have a smartphone, but they don't have access to ready medical care as we do in urban areas of the United States. Rural America has its issues as well, similar to emerging nations. We shouldn't forget that. But I think that your words have particular import because you're talking about the potential of bringing good medical care to people in remote areas or rural areas or emerging nations where they don't have access to biotherapeutics or even pill therapies. So thank you for that comment. Julian, just a quick comment. Sarah said new stuff on the horizon. With Galen Growth, I always find new stuff is on the horizon, and I thank you for that. You're constantly gaining our attention. Could you share also a little bit about how this conversation might actually influence a future report?
Yes, I think in two quick ways. I'm conscious of time here. The first one would be that everything you've heard today will continue to be critical in importance. What we'll see in the ecosystem is more reality, not a return back to where we were. And sadly, the macros haven't changed much over the last 18 months. And of course, as we know, in November, a new circus is in town, and we'll see what volatility that adds to the whole ecosystem. But from our perspective, to address your question, Gil, Sarah and I have these conversations regularly as we think about, what is happening and how do we help continue shed some light. We are very interested in how pain points in value chain are driving the focus of partners when they look at digital health innovation. For example, if you look at pharmacos, they've been playing in digital health, and I mean playing in a nice way, along the whole of their value chain. But really, at the end of the day, where they're starting to take a step back and really refocus energies and when it comes to digital health is where the pain is hurting them the most, and that is pipeline, and that is research. And so we will see much more emphasis there and much more investment there, and that's a sort of focus that we're taking going forwards. And so, for example, later on this year, we'll be looking at what are pharmacos doing in digital health and just how good is it.
That's great. No, that's a reinforcement of what we've heard today. Now, Stan, take a little more time. I don't think our audience will mind if you take another minute over the 1 hour, but no, you have the perspective of speaking directly as a bipartisan, nonpartisan sort of representative and ambassador for the category, our Secretary General, as it were. Can you reflect on this conversation and what you'll be bringing to your community?
Yeah, I think there's, again, it just seems that this tie between partnerships and evidence are so critical. And what we're seeing with the Galen Growth Report really focuses on this need for, and what David was talking about earlier, this early evidence generation, much like an early commercial model, which is the ability to use evidence, and we call this the Hanbury ladder, which is named after Richard Hanbury from Sana, which is evidence is not a bar that you cross, evidence is a ladder you climb up. And I'm writing a paper right now on this, but the Hanbury ladder is, and this is something that he discussed a couple of years ago with me, which is this ladder you climb of evidence, and that we need to do that, and incrementally with every piece of new evidence that a group can build around their model, they'd also need to make sure they have the partnerships to sustain them. That looks like really what we're seeing with the Galen Growth Report here, is that the partnerships are being built at a higher rate, and hopefully with more efficacy and more sustainability, more effectiveness long-term for patients around the world.
Stan, thank you. First of all, I want to thank each of our panelists, David, Julian, Sarah, Stan. So appreciative to you. This was really a course that could be given at the Columbia Business School in 1 hour. Follow Galen Growth, follow David Klein and Click Therapeutics for really the cutting edge of the category. Stan, HITLABs, great content constantly being shared almost on a daily basis of the types of conversations and the meetings. I think you hold 2 conferences a year, Stan. Is that correct? 2 big
That's correct. Yeah, we hold the Innovator Summit coming up last week of November this year, which is really the review of all evidence in digital health over the past year. And again, really focusing on the best and the biggest evidence that's been published across all medical societies and everything. And then we have the New York City Digital Health Week, the first week of May every year. So again, kind of like growing up to be really the JP Morgan Health of New York City each year for partnerships and life science. So again, anyone who has more questions, just hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to share more information about those.
Stan, everyone, thank you. Great conversation. This will be a must watch again and again. I want to wish everybody continued success. Thank you, Galen Growth, for bringing us together. David, thank you on such a busy day for joining us. Stan, always illuminating, always leading the category in the discussion. One of the founders, thank you so much for being here today. Take care, everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Gil. Thanks, everyone.